All right, on paper, this is my favorite type of album. Let's see if it translates from page to ears. Yeah, let's do it. Monsters from the Id by Ben Craven. So Ben Craven is a multi-instrumentalist artist from Australia. He has put out 4 albums before this one being his 5th, and it's always very saturated and rooted in a progressive rock setting. What I particularly love about this one is that it's really just the 2 tracks. We've got Die Before You Wake and Amnes Flows Aeternum. Oh boy. It mimics the songwriting shifts of like the progressive rock age from like the 70s, where it would come in a record. And you would have the one side be the one track and then flip it over, and the other side would be the other track. Man, I love a presentation like this because it really allows for an artist to just stretch their legs and wander a landscape for some kind of like really satisfying crescendo. My only real gripe with this one though is I don't feel as though either side 1 being Die Before You Wake or side 2 Amnes Flows Aeternum really have that big moment. It wanders the landscape for a bit. It covers a lot of ground, but a lot of these tracks don't really have that big crescendo-y moment on it. And someone like myself, it's going to take a little bit more time to really digest and really get into a lot of those more crystal clear moments on here. The actual music itself has this really interesting blend of neo and symphonic prog on here. I like the neo aspect in very lush, very bright, very vibrant, very dark colors on this in terms of overtones, but it's also very dynamic. It's very symphonic in its approach. So it's kind of a crossroads. It's kind of a blending between those progressive rock subgenres in that. Talking about Die Before You Wake, the first track at 19 and a half minutes. I really like how this opens up in like a like Holt's Planet Suite within Mars, the Bringer of War, where it's got that dun 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 dun, and it really like crystal clear. It grabs you from the beginning. It's very menacing. It's very powerful. But when we get into the second part of the Ancient Majesty, it becomes more of like a singer-songwriter, much more of a contemporary presentation of sounds. And I do wonder if some of these transitions feel a little off. They're not completely seamless in their transitions. I do feel as though maybe they could have worked out a little bit in how they're moving from one passage to the other. But still, I really like where this track goes. Once we get into that kind of singer-songwriter that brings it forth, again, we have a lot of those shadowy moments. It's not necessarily as lush. When we get into the midpoint of this track after the opening and kind of blossoming of this, it has a lot of these very somber, very heavenly moments. Provides a contrast to the opening passages on here. I like how this kind of blooms and brings it forth, and we're starting to lay down some of the themes and ideas that will then be reprised later on. And I like how, again, we're moving from one passage to the other. So when we get into like the second half of this track, we start to revisit some of those more bombastic moments, a lot of those more meaty and gripping moments. It's bigger, but it's a little bit more chaotic. And this is what I really like, is how Ben is able to build a song up. And within about the 12-minute mark into the 13-minute mark, we're really starting to build up to one of the first crescendos. And I do find it interesting that it took about 13 minutes to get to a point like this that really has this kind of satisfying kind of moment. And I'm loving the keyboard work on here. I'm loving those luscious high mellotron sounds. This is where like that retro prog and that neo prog really starts to come into the fold. And we come into that reprise of one of the themes that he set out near the midpoint of the track. And then the last 2 minutes are this beautiful guitar playout. I do wish as though the guitar playout kind of was a little bit more chunky, a little bit more meaty, and I felt like I wish they developed it a little bit more. It just kind of felt like it was plunked down in this track, just without too much of a forethought on there. But that was Die Before You Wake. This is where we come into the second half of Amnes Flows Aeternum, and I actually prefer this one a little bit more. I love how it takes about like 4.5 minutes to really build and really create the soundscapes. And I'm loving the combination of the bass and the guitar works on this with the overlay of the keyboards, and creating this atmosphere, like really, really creating this brilliant hues of like, I'm getting flavors of magenta, the band, but also magenta, the color, very dark but lush in that sense, blues and reds in that kind of case. And what I really particularly love is how much focus is being placed on putting down the roadmap for where the song is going to go in the second half of this. So we have all these moments, all these passages, all these themes that will be played around with a little bit later on that I really, really do enjoy and like to kind of think about and get myself used to. So by the time they're revisited, I'm like, oh, that's right, this is going on. Or, oh, that's correct. I really like this kind of passage on there. And I love how chaotic it sounds at times. It's like reminiscing like an Emerson, Lake and Palmer in how chaotic, how bombastic it sounds within all this bringing to chaos and trying to align it into order by these setups and payoffs. And Ben's vocal works are so emotional. Like, I love how he's channeling so much different powers and emotions in his voice. Love how astute it sounds. And, you know, the playouts, we're getting like some Rick Wakeman styles on the keyboard work. It's very fast paced. It definitely has that Rick sound on it that allows for the finale, the big crescendo to happen at the end. The play out, fade out of the final track and the final moments of this album, I wish kind of built to something a little bit more exciting. I just felt like it ended on a little bit more of a whimper rather than a bang. I wish that there was some big meaty play out, some big mighty crescendo. You know, we've spent about 35 minutes really building up this album, and I just wish that there was something really tasty, really like finite to end it all off on. But the play out is still fun. It's still great. It's a good way to close off the album. It just was a little bit lackluster for me. So in the end, Monsters from the Id by Ben Craven. Man, it was a treat. If you're a fan of progressive rock, if you're a fan of this kind of style of neo-prog, of symphonic retro-prog, I think you're really, really going to love this album. I've had a blast diving in, getting used to the different passages, finding out how everything kind of works together, and diving deep into two brilliant long tracks. Because as good as the music has been from 2022, we haven't had like really stand out epic tracks from the progressive rock scene, and this provides some really good contenders for those. So really enjoyed this one. I think you guys should check it out. And I will say Monsters from the Id by Ben Craven is one that I will absolutely pick up in physical format. I would love to put this on the turntable and just be like washed away with it. Great, great effort. Good stuff. It gets the note seal of approval. I had a blast with this one, and I think you will too. Run, don't walk to listen to this one. I think you're really going to love it. So that's what I've got for Monster from the Id from Ben Craven. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.